But my perspective is that just like BLM, just like even Black History Month, as Morgan Freeman puts it, Black history is American history.
I don't usually talk on race, but I figured this might be a more productive conversation coming from somebody who looks like me. When you say that BLM, a Black Anthem, and Black History Month are divisive, you're basing that off your assumption, as you put it, that American history is everyone's history. And that assumption is absolutely incorrect. History, until the fairly recent advent of gender studies and racial studies, was almost universally written by men and about men. The reason we need women's history, Asian history, indigenous history, Black history, is entirely because without those specifiers, the history being taught and written about is almost guaranteed to be the history of men, European men. And the majority of those teaching that history are also white. Their students are not. It is a whitewashed history. The Watchmen TV series, set in an alternative reality, opens on Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, where Black Americans are being dragged into the streets, beaten and unalived. Their stores and homes looted and robbed, while a biplane flies overhead dropping bombs on the neighborhood. And my immediate reaction watching it was, wow, they're really going out there and being creative with their alternative history. There's no way that could really happen. But the joke was on me. It really did happen. It's just one of a number of atrocities that aren't really taught or talked about as part of everyone's history. Like the LA Chinese massacre, or the Tuskegee syphilis study, or the Japanese internment camps of the Second World War, where over 120,000 people, the majority American citizens, had their possessions seized or stolen and were incarcerated in prison camps, and their only crime was having Japanese ancestry, which meant they couldn't be trusted. And that whitewashing continues even today, with school boards trying to remove the few alternative perspectives still present in the syllabus, making American history less and less everybody's history. But there's another more dangerous issue with this perspective, one that has us telling migrants to roll up the flags of their home country, to not celebrate Cinco de Mayo, that immigrants don't integrate, while cities across the country spend tens of thousands of dollars dyeing their rivers green to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. When we deny that history is mostly a male history, a YT male history, we build the justification for the disenfranchisement of YT men, a tool of YT supremacy. When's YT History Month? When's Men's History Month are the questions. While virtually every book in the history section that does not specify women or a race in the title is virtually guaranteed to tell the story of exactly those men. Michael Kimmel's fantastic essay, Invisible Masculinity, talks about this phenomena, and I highly recommend you read it. I've linked it in my bio. How by not recognizing this default, this implicit bias, that men, and specifically YT men, can unironically claim that their history, their story, is ignored and silenced, while it is in fact the most documented perspective. It also validates that the counter to Black narratives is whiteness, ignoring the fact that whiteness as a concept didn't exist before the 17th century. There was no shared understanding of a common YT race among Europeans. It arose entirely as a means to justify the inhuman treatment of some, but not others. Why, if you came from one country, you had power, but if you came from another country, you were powerless. If they aren't a civilized YT, then they're subhuman. It was also established as a means to elevate and separate European indentured servants and spare them from the horrific treatment of non-white slaves. It ignores that when Italian, Irish, Polish immigrants and others came to the US, they were hated, demonized and oppressed, and that they escaped that oppression not through solidarity with non-YT minorities that were facing the same treatment, or by uniting together and fighting for liberation by tearing down those oppressive systems, but by co-opting whiteness and leaving non-YT minorities behind. Whiteness as a concept is rooted in oppression and justification for why the powerful get to hold onto their privilege and use it to dehumanize others. And this is why it is so important to talk about Black history, Indigenous history, Asian history, women's history, but also reject the notion of a universal YT history, to instead talk about European or Slavic or even specifically English history. The feudalism and monarchical tyranny that prompted the Magna Carta then inspired the Declaration of Independence, which proudly proclaimed all men are created equal. The YT was silent in the Declaration, but not in the laws that were enacted and practiced, which made it very clear non-whites were not equal at all. The racial division you're talking about has always existed throughout history. Talking about that history from broader and diverse perspectives does not widen that division. It draws attention to the fact it exists. It encourages discussion, awareness, and advocacy on how we go about dismantling it, and authentically living the truth behind the idea that all are created equal.